There is newly released police body camera video from inside Joel Osteen's Lakewood church in Houston. The images show the suspect, that mother with her 7-year-old son.
Okay, gather around and brace yourselves, because what I'm about to tell you has people absolutely shook. Joel Osteen, the man with the blinding smile, the $100 million net worth, and the biggest church in America, is in some seriously hot water. And honey, this is not just Sunday morning drama. We're talking about a church shooting, secret cash stashed in walls, federal loan scandals, hurricane victims turned away at the door, and a congregation that's starting to ask some very uncomfortable questions. So grab your tea, get comfortable, and let's get into everything the Osteen Empire does not want you to know. The Empire. Who is Joel Osteen really? Before we get into the receipts, let's set the scene, because context is everything when we're talking about somebody of this scale. Joel Scott Osteen was born on March 5, 1963, in Houston, Texas. Now, here's the thing. Joel wasn't supposed to be the guy. He studied radio and television communications at Oral Roberts University and never actually graduated. No seminary degree, no formal theology training. For 17 years, he worked behind the scenes producing his father, John Osteen's television ministry. Then, in 1999, his father died suddenly, and Joel, never having preached a single sermon publicly, stepped up to the pulpit. What happened next? Pure American spectacle. Within years, Lakewood Church had transformed from a modest congregation into the single largest church in the United States. They moved into a former NBA arena, the Compaq Center in Houston, a 606,000 square foot, 16,000-seat colossus. Today, the church reportedly draws over 40,000 weekly attendees in person, and its televised services reportedly reach tens of millions globally. And Joel? He is estimated to be worth $100 million. I promise you, you heard that correctly. $100 million. He lives in a 17,000-square-foot mansion in the Houston suburbs that the Osteens reportedly purchased for $10.5 million back in 2010. According to estimates, that property is now valued somewhere between $14 and $16 million. They also still own a former Houston home worth around $3 million. Now, you might be wondering, if he's worth that much, is he at least paying himself a fat church salary? Well, technically, no. Joel stopped taking a salary from Lakewood Church back in 2004 or 2005. His income reportedly comes from book advances, royalties, speaking fees, and merchandise. His first book, Your Best Life Now, was a massive bestseller, and he has since published more than 20 books. But here's where things start to smell a little funny. So, if the church isn't paying his bills, then who exactly is Lakewood Church's money for? The prosperity gospel. God wants you rich. Or does he? At the core of everything Joel Osteen does is what theologians call the prosperity gospel. And if you don't know what that is, buckle up, because this is the foundation of every single controversy we're about to discuss. The prosperity gospel, sometimes called name it and claim it, is the belief that God rewards genuine faith with financial blessings and material success. In other words, if you are faithful enough, God will make you rich. And if you're struggling financially, well, maybe your faith just isn't strong enough, honey. The Harvard University Divinity School has described the prosperity gospel as something that, at worst, is predatory and manipulative, particularly when churches or pastors require heavy tithing. Critics argue that it essentially guilts people who are already financially vulnerable into giving even more money, because the implication is that their donation is an act of faith that will be multiplied back to them by God. Joel Osteen's teachings are perhaps the most prominent modern example of this doctrine. And even within Christian circles, he has faced withering criticism for it. Reformed theologian Michael Horton went on 60 Minutes back in 2007 and told CBS that Osteen's message is, in his words, heresy. Horton's core critique? That Osteen's message makes religion about us instead of about God. Got Questions Ministries, a widely cited Christian resource, noted that Osteen's sermons often sound less like a pastor and more like an inspirational life coach. They observed that, noticeably absent in Osteen's optimistic message, is any mention of sin or repentance. Country singer John Rich publicly went after Osteen in a podcast, stating bluntly, "Joel Osteen is never going to say anything that's going to make anybody uncomfortable, ever on any level, ever." Rich also pointed out that Osteen never does an altar call, the traditional moment in church services where congregants are invited to publicly give their lives to Christ. Thousands of people coming down there to pray and give their life to Jesus. You're not going to see Joel Osteen do that, Rich claimed. And then there's this jaw-dropping detail. According to financial records published by the Houston Chronicle, in 2017, Lakewood's income was $89 million. After all expenses, the church spent just $1.2 million on charitable causes. Let that sink in. A church pulling in $89 million a year, giving $1.2 million in charity. That's barely 1.3%. Meanwhile, the congregation faithfully tithes, believing their giving is an act of spiritual obedience. But wait, if the money isn't going to charity, where exactly is it going? And what happens when a disaster strikes and everyone is watching? Hurricane Harvey. The moment the mask slipped. Oh, this one. If there is a single moment that crystallized everything people already suspected about Joel Osteen and Lakewood Church, it was August 2017, when Hurricane Harvey devastated the city of Houston, Texas. Hurricane Harvey was catastrophic. Thousands of people were displaced from their homes. Churches, mosques, and community centers across the city opened their doors almost immediately to give victims a place to sleep, eat, and gather themselves. And Lakewood Church, the 606,000 square foot, 16,000-seat former sports arena sitting in the middle of one of America's largest cities. On August 27, 2017, the church posted on Facebook that Lakewood was inaccessible due to severe flooding. Associate Pastor John Gray even posted, "If we could get there, we would open the doors." Except, photos began surfacing on social media that appeared to directly contradict the flooding claims. People were driving by and seeing a building that didn't look anywhere near as inaccessible as the church was suggesting. The internet, as it does, erupted. It was only after a tidal wave of public shaming on social media that Lakewood finally opened its doors as a temporary shelter on August 28th, one full day after the initial backlash began. And because the universe has a dark sense of humor, what happened when the church finally did open and hold a service with several hundred evacuees in the audience? People who had just lost everything they owned. Lakewood passed around collection plates. That's right. The church that had to be shamed into opening its doors to disaster victims then asked those very victims to donate money during the service. You cannot make this up. Joel Osteen appeared on CBS This Morning to defend the church's response. "Our doors have always been open. We received people even as soon as the water started receding," he said. But the public wasn't buying it. And things only got more complicated when, according to a report in the Houston Chronicle, the church initially denied receiving any COVID-era federal relief funds, only for U.S. Small Business Administration data to reveal that Lakewood had, in fact, received $4.4 million in Paycheck Protection Program (PPP) loans during the pandemic. This is a church, tax-exempt, bringing in tens of millions per year, taking pandemic small business relief funds. The church did eventually repay the loan in 2021, And they stated the funds went to pay their 368 employees, but the optics were not great, to say the very least. So we've got a church that turned away hurricane victims, collected money from those same victims, and quietly scooped up millions in government loans. But somehow, things were still about to get darker, much darker. Cash in the walls, the mystery that won't go away. Okay, stay with me here, because this one sounds like it belongs in a crime documentary, because honestly, it kind of does. Cast your mind back to March 2014. Houston police reported that $200,000 in cash and $400,000 in checks, totaling $600,000, had been stolen from a safe inside Lakewood Church. The theft was reported. Crime Stoppers of Houston posted a $5,000 reward for information, and then the case went cold for years. Fast forward to November 2021. A plumber, who publicly identified himself only as Justin, was doing repair work inside Lakewood Church's bathroom. While working in the walls, he discovered approximately 500 envelopes stuffed with cash and checks, hidden inside the church walls. Justin came forward immediately and handed everything over to church officials. Houston police later confirmed that evidence from the recovered checks suggested the funds were connected to the very same 2014 robbery. So to be clear, someone stole $600,000 from a church safe, hid a significant portion of it inside the walls of that very same church, and it sat there, completely undiscovered, for 7 years. Now, Justin, this Good Samaritan plumber, said he had expected to at least hear from Osteen directly. "I feel like, at this point, I should have heard something," he told reporters. "I'm just a little upset." Crime Stoppers of Houston ultimately awarded Justin a $20,000 reward, money that had ironically been sitting in a fund that Lakewood itself had donated back in 2014 for the original investigation. The question of who stole the money and how it ended up inside the walls has never been fully, publicly resolved. $500,000 found inside your own church walls 7 years after a robbery, with no real public explanation? If this were anyone else, we'd call it what it is, a scandal. But believe it or not, we're not even at the worst part yet. Gunshots in the sanctuary, the 2024 shooting. February 11th, 2024. A Sunday afternoon at Lakewood Church. Services were underway when, around 2 p.m. Central Time, a 36-year-old woman named Janice Yvonne Moreno entered the building. She was accompanied by her 7-year-old son. She was wearing a trench coat. She carried an AR-15 style rifle. She also had a second rifle in her vehicle. According to police, Moreno confronted an unarmed security guard at the entrance, then moved into a hallway inside the building before opening fire. A 47-year-old man was shot in the leg. 2 off-duty law enforcement officers, a Houston police officer, and a Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission agent who were working security at the church returned fire and shot Moreno, killing her. She had been inside the church for approximately 4 minutes. Tragically, Moreno's 7-year-old son was shot during the exchange of gunfire and was transported to Texas Children's Hospital in critical condition with a gunshot wound to the head. Houston Police Chief Troy Finner told reporters, "What we need to do for him is pray." Here is what made this even more heartbreaking. Moreno had a documented history of mental illness, including being placed under emergency psychiatric detention as far back as 2016. Her ex-mother-in-law, Carranza, had tried for years to get intervention, even unsuccessfully petitioning to be declared conservator of Moreno's son in 2022. She had a particular kind of schizophrenia that caused her to become violent, Carranza told CNN. She threatened her husband, my own son, and we still couldn't get intervention. Moreno had legally purchased her firearm in December 2023, just weeks before the shooting. Texas does not have a so-called red flag law that would allow authorities to remove weapons from individuals believed to be in mental health crisis. The church's security response became an immediate talking point. Moreno had approached an unarmed security guard first, raising questions about why the frontline security at one of the highest-profile churches in America was unarmed. The shooting sparked intense debate about gun control, mental health policy, institutional responsibility, and the basic safety protocols at megachurches. Joel Osteen addressed reporters after the incident. "Of course, we're devastated. We don't understand why these things happen," he said. Lakewood asked the public to pray for Lakewood and our community. Lawsuits followed. A volunteer named Daniel Guzman filed a $10 million complaint alleging Lakewood's failures, including inadequate security training and improper handling of evidence, contributed to harm. Local reporting from 2024 and 2025 confirmed that criminal investigations and civil litigation linked to the shooting and its aftermath were continuing to unfold. A shooting inside the church, a child fighting for his life, lawsuits piling up, and an unarmed guard at the front door of one of America's most famous megachurches. So what does all of this mean for Osteen's future? And the future of Lakewood Church itself? The congregation is changing, and not in his favor. Here's the thing about empires. They look invincible right up until the moment they start to crack. And there are real, verifiable signs that the Lakewood Empire is facing challenges it can't simply smile its way through. The demographic problem is real. As the evangelical landscape shifts across America, megachurches like Lakewood are struggling to attract younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, who are leaving traditional church structures in record numbers. These are generations that prioritize authenticity, community engagement, and social justice. Values that don't exactly align with a $100 million pastor preaching from a former NBA arena. Critics within the Christian community have grown louder. It's not just secular commentators or social media skeptics anymore. It's pastors, theologians, and prominent figures within Christianity itself who are publicly questioning whether what Osteen preaches constitutes sound Christian theology at all. The financial opacity remains a major sticking point. Unlike registered charities, megachurches are not legally required to make detailed financial disclosures to the public. That means congregants who give faithfully every week have no legal right to know exactly how their tithes are being used, given that Lakewood reportedly brought in $89 million. In a single year, while directing just $1.2 million of that toward charitable causes. This lack of transparency is exactly what fuels mistrust. And then there's the weight of accumulated controversy. Hurricane Harvey, the PPP loan, cash in the walls, the 2024 shooting, lawsuits. Each of these incidents on its own might be survivable for a ministry of this size. But stacked on top of each other, they form a picture that is increasingly difficult to look away from. Joel Osteen has always been a master of the pivot, of smiling through the criticism, of staying relentlessly positive, of refusing to engage with the darkness swirling around him. In interviews, he consistently says he chooses not to get distracted by negative comments and prefers to focus on spreading hope and encouragement. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When a child is shot inside your church, when federal data contradicts your public statements about government loans, when disaster victims are turned away and then asked for donations, staying positive isn't a strategy. It's an evasion. So where does this all leave Joel Osteen? Where do things stand now? As things stand right now, Joel Osteen continues to lead Lakewood Church. The services go on. The television ministry continues to broadcast to millions. The books keep selling. The speaking fees keep rolling in. On the surface, the machine is still running, but underneath the polished surface, the cracks are visible, and they are widening. The 2024 church shooting has not fully been resolved from a legal standpoint. Civil litigation connected to the incident was still unfolding into 2025. The questions about security failures and institutional responsibility have not gone away. The prosperity gospel that built his brand is facing unprecedented scrutiny, not just from secular critics, but from the broader Christian community. When theologians call your doctrine heresy on national television and prominent public figures are actively telling their audiences to be skeptical of you, that's not a PR problem you can book deal your way out of. The financial model of megachurches broadly, and Lakewood specifically, is under a microscope. In an era of increasing calls for nonprofit transparency and accountability, a church that takes in nearly $90 million a year and donates barely 1% of that to charitable causes is going to face growing pressure to justify that math.
This morning, Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church is open for business.
There you go, sugar. Do you need a towel?
Taking in Harvey evacuees and truckloads of donations after facing a storm of criticism.
And perhaps most importantly, the congregation is watching. People who gave faithfully for years, who believed the prosperity gospel with their whole hearts, who sent their hard-earned money into that building. Many of them are asking for the first time hard questions about where that money went and whether it was worth it. History is littered with televangelists who seemed untouchable until they weren't. And while Joel Osteen has proven remarkably resilient over the years, the accumulation of verified controversies surrounding him and Lakewood Church suggests that the reckoning, if it comes, will be a long time in the making and impossible to ignore when it arrives. The smile is still there. The stadium is still full. But the story of Joel Osteen is no longer just a story about faith and prosperity. It's becoming a story about accountability. And that story? Far from over. All right, that's everything we've got for you today. If this video had you shook, and I genuinely believe it should, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. I want to know, do you think Joel Osteen is being held to an unfair standard, or is the scrutiny completely deserved? Let's talk about it. I'll see you in the next one.